Topping today's news, a family in eastern New Providence devastated as their loved one shot to death. A local pastor with strong opinions on the government's approach to marital rape, and members of the IDB assess projects they invested millions of dollars into at BPL. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jarino Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Another brazen daylight murder here in the capital after a man believed to be in his early 30s was gunned down in the quiet residential community on Broadfield Road, St. Anne's Close, just off Culbert's Hill in Winton, New Providence. That's Winton Heights, New Providence. Here is officer in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department, Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson, giving the specifics.
Sometime around 3:02 p.m., the victim had pulled up to a residence on Broadfields Road when he was accosted by a lone gunman who produced a firearm and shot him several times. He ran east on Broadfield Road and then north onto St. Anne's Crescent, where he collapsed. This gunman was seen getting into a black vehicle, which we believe is a Nissan type model, where he made good his escape.
Now, that residence was in fact the home of the victim. He died just a few steps from his front door. While police did not officially release the identity of the man, family members on scene unofficially identifies him as 32-year-old Christonio Young, or aka Yayo. According to neighbors in the area, Young had not too long moved into the neighborhood with his mother, who had lived there for some time. Chief Superintendent Johnson noting that police could not provide any motive at this time for the killing, and says criminal investigators are confident that with the information gathered so far, they are following significant leads into this matter. With that said, police are making this appeal.
Again, we appeal to members of the public, especially persons from this community, to please assist the police in contacting us if you seen or heard anything during this incident at 502-999-123 or our crime tipsers line.
The government's approach to marital rape is undermining the institution of marriage, according to senior pastor of Kingdom Life Church, Pastor Cedric Moss. Speaking at the Rotary Club of West Nassau's monthly meeting, Pastor Moss told Rotarians that the Minnis administration's approach was the only proper way to deal with this ongoing situation.
That approach was one where you address the mischief, you address the issue, and at the same time, you upheld marriage as the high institution that it really is. And that is the approach that I supported. That is the approach that we need to take, I believe, and this approach that we are taking is wrong. And let me share with you quickly why this approach is wrong. This approach is seeking to do two main things. Number one, to redefine rape. And number two, to expand what consent actually means.
He goes on to say that the current Sexual Offenses Amendment Bill only protects women that are not married or their marriage is an ongoing court matter. Under the new draft Sexual Offenses Amendment Bill 2022, rape is defined as the act of any person not under 14 years old having sexual intercourse with another person without the consent of that person, where he knows that that person does not consent or is reckless as to whether the person consents. The Kingdom Life pastor asserts that the new bill redefines how married people should relate to one another.
So, for example, a husband comes home, his wife is in bed, she is asleep, and he desires to have sex, but she is asleep. But he's not sure if she is really in deep sleep, so he gets in bed, he cuddles near her, and he touches her in a way that is captured in this definition of sexual intercourse. Now,
Pastor Moss believes passing a law like this will cause married men who have healthy relationships with their wives to become rapists, whether they go before the courts or not. Now, as for his solution to fix the Sexual Offenses Amendment Bill 2022, Pastor Moss shared the following thoughts.
When a married man forces himself on his wife, he does one thing wrong. The sex is not wrong because that's legitimate. That happens in marriage, and it would have been okay had she consented. The only thing that is wrong is the lack of consent, the force. And what should happen is the penalty meted out to that man should match the force that is involved.
Pastor Moore says the only thing that needs to be discussed as a country is how to provide protection for wives whose marriage is not before the courts. High-level Inter-American Development Bank, or IDB, representatives took a tour of the Battery Energy Storage System, or BESS, for Bahamas Power and Light's Blue Hill Power Station, along with government officials of the Ministry of Finance's Project Execution Unit Reconstruction with Resilience in the Energy Sector in the Bahamas on Tuesday. That was December 13th. A number of government officials from the Ministry of Finance, like we said, accompanied the IDB reps. That included Daniel Carrera Marquis, the IDB country representative for the Bahamas, and the Battery Energy Storage System facility will provide an energy reserve and inject a new level of resilience and smartness into the existing Nassau electrical grid. The facility is a component of an overall initiative which is laid out in the IDB loan program to advance the deployment of renewable energy in the Bahamas. The IDB loan program comprised an $80 million loan supplemented with a $9 million grant provided by the European Union. Advisor to the government, Edward Darville, explained that a 21-megawatt battery is being installed at the station at Blue Hills, which will serve several functions, including stabilizing the grid so that it will always provide perfect voltage. It will help in the event of PPL losing an engine, and it will also help to prevent spikes that damage equipment and appliances when the power comes back on. After the BPL tour, the IDB representatives also visited the CV Bethel High School rooftop solar power system, an initiative also completed by the funding from the same IDB project. And finally, in this segment, for a long time, we have known that mangroves are important as they act as fish nurseries and protection from storm surges. Additionally, they are important. We know now that they are important in the fight against global warming. In this next report, a third and final report on the mangroves study conducted by scientists from the Perry Institute for Marine Science, marine biologists look at ways to restore and prevent damage to mangrove ecosystems going forward. In a previous report, we learned that mangroves have become extremely important and valuable in the fight against global warming, as they have been proven to absorb considerable amounts of carbon dioxide from the air and deposit the gas into the sediments through their roots. A recent study on mangroves in the Bahamas by scientists at the Perry Institute for Marine Science has revealed that mangrove forests in the Bahamas are generally healthy and functioning properly. But the study also discovered that many mangroves have been damaged by either humans or nature. In this third and final report on the study, we will hear what the team of local and international scientists, led by Executive Director Dr. Craig Dahlgren, have to say about best ways to help damaged mangroves recover, beginning here with split mangroves caused by the construction of roads through a mangrove forest.
We also looked at restoration initiatives, and the Perry Institute for Marine Science strongly recommends that all work in mangrove restoration is guided by the best available science. So what do we mean by that? Well, in some places, like where there's old logging roads in some of the Pine Islands, like Grand Bahama or Andros, causeways were built to put in these logging roads that blocked the flow of water from one side of a creek to another. We can reverse that. We can restore water flow by putting in a culvert, or even better, a bridge, or opening up sections of that causeway to allow the water to flow back and forth tidally and restore the function of those mangroves, make them better places for fish nursery habitat, make them better at preventing damage from flooding.
As for mangroves adversely impacted by nature like Hurricane Dorian and other hurricanes, Dr. Dahlgren, an expert in tropical marine ecosystems, says there needs to be special concerted efforts to help those mangrove forests recover.
Places where mangroves were killed by Hurricane Dorian, however, in Abaco and Grand Bahama, replanting mangroves is needed. A lot of these mangrove stands are all just completely dead and not having a lot of new mangroves coming in there. So we need to help jumpstart the recovery process and plant mangroves. In places like Bonefish Pond National Park, there was a dredge channel there that altered water flow. And what we did several years ago was both restored the hydrology, so we restored water flow, and we also had to replant mangroves there because they weren't coming back on their own.
Since Hurricane Dorian, there has been an increase in efforts by nonprofit, nature-based organizations and individuals to replant mangroves in designated areas around the country. In their final assessment, the scientists lamented the negative impact of mangrove forests that have possibly been lost forever, replaced with marinas and housing developments. They believe these types of adverse impacts directly affects biodiversity.
And finally, habitat loss, especially in wetland areas like mangrove forests, are one of the main causes of species extinctions today. So protecting and restoring critical mangrove forests across the Caribbean Sea, including the Bahamas, is a powerful solution to biodiversity loss in the Bahamas and across the region.
Dr. Dahlgren and his team drew on years of research using drones, satellites, and in-water surveillance at hundreds of sites across the Bahamas before releasing what they have coined as the first ever mangrove report card for the Bahamas. Their study on mangroves was also featured in an article written by Tashina Robinson of Precision Media Agency. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.